health and behaviour change. So, having worked in custom development of these types of solutions for so long, I've seen how hard it is time and time again for our clients to go through these processes that you have to go through to create a really creative digital solution. The complexity in terms of the different disciplines, the range of expertise, and the big problem that you often have with a bespoke project where, for us, the client will come in and in the past we used to start with a blank slate. Sit here and look at a whiteboard and say, well, what are the outcomes that we want to achieve, and then work back from there. And that's great in terms of allowing completely open creativity, but it also makes it very hard to ensure that there's good match of expectations, that we always get best practice in everything that we do, that we really make use of everything we've learned as a company over the years. And so Cognos is an attempt to take everything that we've learned over all this time and basically productize that. So we not only have the best technology, but we have the best design and the best practices built into the process to make it easy. Now, when you go and look at what's happening in the health and education app space, there's been a lot of data. Now, we're now 10 years into the mobile app space. There's been a lot of data published in the last 2 years about the efficacy of health and education apps. And consistently, what we're finding is a few apps are very successful and a large cohort of apps, the majority of apps, that seem to be failing abysmally from the experiences of the end users. And the reasons for that are not using good evidence-based approaches, solutions not being sufficiently personalised for the individual, solutions not being engaging, obvious thing, but the engagement, particularly on mobile solutions, is often not executed very well, and a lack of integration into whatever the larger learning picture is. So, this first generation of apps has been very much producing standalone apps that do one thing but don't necessarily integrate into the larger picture of the teaching and learning experience or the health behaviour change experience. This is data from last year where we can see the cost to build what these researchers determine as an average app is very high. $170,000 US for an average app, but you've got sophisticated apps typically costing $500,000 or more. So it puts this sort of more sophisticated app out of the reach of large sections of the potential customer base, particularly in things like higher education, where we don't tend to get these kinds of budgets. Projects take a long time and they need highly specialised expertise. So I'm just going to in multiple areas, and that's something that's often lacking in the build process, is not having all of the expertise in there from a design and build point of view. Another way to look at it is when you think of the apps that are out there, you've got people who have the resources to create apps, and they generally do not tend to be the greatest subject matter experts. And so a lot of those apps that you've got out there are built by people with great technical expertise or access to venture capital or whatever, but they really don't necessarily know best practice in teaching and learning or in health or in behaviour change. On the other hand, you have lots of great people, particularly in the higher ed sector, who have fantastic expertise but don't always have access to the necessary resources to build these types of experiences. And so what's our expertise in this and where do we come from? So as I mentioned, I've personally been working in this area for over 20 years now, and 2 and 2 is a business that traces its history back to about 2004, and it's a company that specialises in making high-end, bespoke, beautiful digital experiences for learning and behaviour change. And we've worked over all different kinds of audiences. So this, for instance, just seeing screenshots from ABC Zoom, a product we produce for the ABC and Education Services Australia, a beautiful flipped classroom experience for learning science for 14 and 15-year-olds. The language learning space, so this is the repository for all Mandarin, Bahasa Indonesia and Japanese language learning resources for the K-12 system in Australia. We built beautiful gamified experience around this. Great technology behind it in terms of how we involve teachers and students in the learning experience. This one went on to win the IMS Global Learning Impact Award, which is probably the highest award we can win in our area. And then things that we've done with people like Curtin University around how we engage students in life on campus and preparing people to study online or for their future career options. Lots of things in the physical and mental health space as well. And despite having a lot of success, and our claim to fame is we've won, I think, 54 awards, which is more than anyone else, I think, worldwide in this space. We had consistent frustrations with what we were doing. The problems that we found were that the projects were really too difficult. They were so painful for our clients generally to go through these complex processes of bringing these things alive. They required a lot of money, so the sorts of things that you saw before, I mean, something like the language learning space is in the 7 figures. And consistently, despite great published results, we always thought that the outcomes were not as good as they could be. And a lot of this stemmed from the fact that as we had a view over so many of these different projects, we could see that best practice just not being leveraged everywhere because we were doing everything from scratch for people. The other thing that was really frustrating, I don't have a point about it here, but is the whole issue of funding envelopes. So the problem that a lot of the work we've done has been grant funded. So our client gets a grant, we build a great product, it goes out there for a year or two, grant money runs out, great product dies, disappears into history because it's too difficult to maintain, update, keep it alive. So we've seen so many great products that really touch people's lives and change their lives for a short amount of time that just don't exist anymore. So part of moving to a platform for us was how do we make it really cheap and cost effective to keep updating these things, to keep them alive without having to go back and get new large buckets of money. And so this is where the idea of low or no code platforms come in. And when we think of the history of the internet has been about democratization of content creation. If you think back to the 90s, it was about anyone being able to create a web page, and then in the early 2000s, it was products like GarageBand allowing anyone to do professional audio recording, or the ability to make a great looking video in iMovie, YouTube allowing these things to be circulated. And that type of democratization has moved into software development in the last couple of years. So if you look at the business process area of software development, that's the area that tends to have the most money thrown at it, and so it tends to be a bit ahead of the curve. There's already been a move away from custom software development with people coding everything up. So if you go into a bank or a government department now, whereas a couple of years ago they were madly trying to employ more and more app developers to produce their apps, they're now using products like Microsoft Power Apps and Fliplet, which greatly reduce the amount of custom coding they're doing and allow them to do those repetitive things that just need a bit of customization in a way that's high quality and fast and easy to turn around. So for us, what we wanted to do is let's take everything we learned and apply that same approach. So this is not about cookie cutter type stuff, but how we make really high quality stuff, but reduce all the manual programming work in there. And so when you think of the custom development process, typically you have to tie yourself into a developer. I was saying to Lynn before that we know, our experience in the higher ed space working with researchers is we often meet researchers who've had next to no funds, so they get a couple of students in to help them try and build an app, and there tends to be all sorts of issues with that, perhaps not getting the quality that they need. There tends to be this tunnel effect that you've got a limited amount of time and money, and you've just got to get something built, and you become really focused on initial idea, which makes it very hard to iterate and improve what you're building. It's complex, it's slow, it's expensive, as we've talked about, and difficult to maintain. The difference with moving to a platform-based approach is it now puts a subject matter expert in charge. It allows them to iterate very quickly. And this is the key thing that we're finding with people. It's no longer about let's sit down with X $100,000 and work out a project plan over months where from the beginning we're trying to design a finished product. Instead, it's let's do something really quick, small, get it out, test it, build on it, iterate on it. And with a platform-based approach, that becomes a lot easier. In turn, that is simplifying product life cycle. You're getting something tangible in the hands of the end user quickly, and it becomes more maintainable. In the case of some platforms, and certainly ours, you know, we have the ability also to publish out to almost any device without writing new code, which also makes things scale a lot more easily. So that brings us to what Cognos is, and we talk about it as being something that allows anyone to create high-quality, feature-rich games, apps, and simulations for education, health, and behaviour change. And what is that productization? Well, for us, it's productizing all of the layers of the development process. So we want to have the best user interface, the best user experience, which is a fairly common experience across mobile devices in particular, already templated in a form that's easy to push out without having to redesign the wheel all the time. We then template the different types of interactions that we have. So when we talk about templates in a product like Cognos, a template can be a VR environment. It can be a 3D game, but it can also be something simple like a survey or traditional e-learning content. It really doesn't matter what it is. If it's something that we can take content and put it into, we can create a template around it. And those templates, what we do is we have a big library of templates that we're always building on, but you can also then bring in external developers. Basically, any Unity developer can come in with an SDK and build their own template that they then drop into what we do. And so that's where we see a lot of opportunity in the mixed reality space, where you might be using a specialist developer, or you might be using students to create a really great MR experience, but you don't want to have to deal with building all the other bits for solutions, and just being able to drop that into something broader. Underneath that, we have a series of artificial intelligence engines, and these connect how we put content into the templates. So, for instance, we have something called the cognition engine, and the cognition engine is built on principles around how memories are formed and how understanding is formed. And essentially it's taking what were psychologically proven principles like the forgetting curve and interleaving, and looking at them through a more modern neuroscientific lens, and creating an algorithm that allows us to put content into templates in a way that allow for shorter learning experiences that deliver stronger learning outcomes, better understanding, and better long-term retention of content. Just philosophically, from our point of view, we're always trying to move away from the idea of content delivery followed by high-stakes assessment. Instead, what we want is learning experiences that where the learner is assessed through that experience. As the learning occurs, we track the learning occurring. So we still have an assessment engine in there, because obviously people need to do formal assessments, and you can do that as well. We have a survey engine. So as I was saying to Lynn earlier, the earliest success of Cognos has been very much in the research sector. So we've got a lot of people doing things in the medical space, creating apps that go into clinical trials as adjuncts to medication and things like that, where we need to collect more traditional survey data, and that may be combined with some more immersive and game experiences. And then we have something called the behavior engine, and excuse the US spelling, we've just spent a lot of time presenting over there. So the behavior engine is, I'll try and keep this simple. It's basically, for the more technically minded people, it's basically a trigger engine. And what I mean by that is that anything that occurs in the app, any data that we've collected about people, we're able to live trigger individual events for that person. And so this allows you to do things like simple gamification. So if you think about game-based apps that you might use on your phone, the ones that are really good do things like reward you for streaks. If you play the game every day for 5 days, they give you a badge or something like that. Or you can create a behavior that says, if someone opens this app 5 days in a row, I'm going to reward them a badge. But you could also create a behavior let's say this has been used in a clinical trial, someone hasn't taken their medication for a couple of days, we're going to send them an alert to take their medication. They get 4 days they haven't taken their medication, we're going to set an alert to the clinician who's running the study so that they can pick up the telephone and find out why aren't you taking your medication, so that we try and stop people falling out of studies and things of that nature. And these individual behavioural events can be linked one to the next. And it's a bit hard in a presentation like this to explain the power of that, but essentially it means you can start to highly personalise the experience for the individual, and you can start to test ideas around what might drive engagement very, very quickly. So you can do A/B testing, set up tests very quickly and see what the results are, and then say, well, for this type of person, we know that for men aged 25 to 30, this kind of interaction tends to work best, so we're going to start triggering those for those people. We have this data repository that sits underneath the platform that records pretty much everything that happens in the app. So it's essentially not just assessment data, but recording how long it takes to touch the screen to do particular things. And that becomes really useful in terms of understanding where learning or behaviour change occurs, and very useful often in a research environment. We then have a full social network built into Cognos, so that when you're building an app on this, you can immediately have those social functions, friends, teams, which can be classes, abilities to run more gamified things like challenges where one person challenges another, or a teacher challenges a class to complete something. People can share results. We have within the social network what we call a kids safe mode, so when we're using it for kids applications, there's no text, and they can only friend people they know in the physical world and things like that. And then underneath that, we have an insights platform, which is in effect a web-based data dashboard where the teacher or clinician or parent or the student or end user as well can see all the data on the individual presented very nicely, and we show the progression in the learning and behaviour change, as well as the ability to drill down to individual results and interactions. And then that can also be looked at a macro level, so you can start to look at one cohort versus another and things of that nature. And then we have this relationship management functionality in here, which we also refer to as a clinical register. So if you're running studies on this, what it means is you can start to manually record data into the same database. So for instance, in a medical environment where a clinician is giving their patient an app, they're also going to want to record the face-to-face interactions that they have. This allows them to do that against the user's profile. It allows them to do things like manually push messages out to the person's device and things of that nature. And then what we're trying to do is create that sort of virtuous circle where we're bringing in all this data, we're able to analyse that data, but then as the app owner, you can use that data to improve the app experience. And again, this is why working on a platform is so great, because in the past, our clients would have got data on what was working, what wasn't working, and then there would have been a whole change request process. Let's go and find $30,000 so we can make some changes to this app. Now with this platform, people are getting in and changing things live. Just to give you an example of the range of early things we built in the first year on this product, things like sports training, which we never thought about because we came very much from a background of cognition, and that's what we were thinking about. But we found that it's been useful in that area. And things like STEM learning. With Veolia, we're rolling out games into shopping centres to drive retail staff to have better recycling behaviours. We're working with an organisation called My Chance in Singapore around testing creativity in children. A consultancy called E3 is building a highly sophisticated business simulation on this, where business graduates coming into large corporates get to go and play different C-level roles in an organisation to understand how real-time events occur. We've got people doing a lot of interest in the ageing space, and a lot of things going on around positive ageing, around cognition and mild cognitive impairment. And that's a real interest for us as well. And we've got quite a few people who bring together in that area. Even you know, this is an IBS gastrointestinal tracker app that's being rolled out with clinicians in the States to help track, basically IBS issues with patients live and in real time. The big thing for us in the first half of this year is we've been working with the Victorian government building cognitive interventions around gambling, so to help problem gamblers break addiction cycles and that type of thing. Sorts of areas that we're moving into more and more tend to be more cognitive things. We're very interested in doing work around ASD, ADHD, depression, things of that nature, as well as doing the more straight educational content. I'll just hand over to Anna, who will talk about the new version of Cognis and where we're taking the app creation process.
So V1 of our product was very much about making the app creation process simpler and easier and cheaper and all those things. So once we launch V2 of the app, the idea of this no-code platform that allows anybody to go in and create it. And so we as well recognize the importance and the responsibility of, because we've put all of this smarts in the app, we need to sort of guide people through the process of how do I make a good app? How do I make it engaging? All of the stages that we internally, when we're making these big budget sort of boutique apps, go through, but trying to distill that within the system and guide people through. So everything is kind of done through wizards and being able to kind of then provide that additional layer of insight into the actual process of creating these apps. So we look at these three pillars. One, let's create an app really quickly, as quickly as possible, so that you can go in, get and play around with it, and then go through, customize it, add your own content in there, add your own behaviors in there, all of those component elements in there. And that idea of being able to, again, iterate, go test it, play around with it, change it, get others to test it, play around, change it. So rather than sort of the whole thing of, you often say with ethics, for example, you apply at the beginning of your thing, you know, by the time you get around to actually creating the app, so much has changed, but you've only got approval for that original one. But if you can go in, create something as quickly as possible and have it evolve through the process of the whole project, then you've got a much more solid foundation for the app itself. And then our final stage really is connecting. If you're making an app that nobody ever sees or nobody ever uses, then you know you've lost that sort of thing there. So really about creating this network of apps and that sort of social network side of things that allows people to discover apps that are relevant for them and what they're looking and trying to do. So through the new app creation, we kind of go, all right, let's create an app. It's as simple as 3 steps. So first we get you think about, all right, what's the name of your app? Again, let's look at pretty basic stuff. And then we're going, all right, tell us a bit about your app. What type of app is it? What category, subcategory does it fit into? And based purely on sort of, I guess, our experience in creating apps and in the app world, we can then make certain assumptions. We know if you're wanting to create a corporate app, you know, for big business, we're not going to give you irrelevant sort of kids themed things. So we can then, you know, not only personalize sort of the app when you're doing that experience, but also the app creation process to make it simpler and easier to create an app that's going to be effective for your audience. And then, you know, again, you want your app to look schmick, you want it to look good and professional. So we sort of package everything up so that it's easy to kind of have it all looking really nice and smooth. And then the idea, once you've got this sort of initial created app, you go in, you can preview it live, you can sort of go in, and then the customization step. So we have simple sort of approaches. So if you're wanting to kind of put content that's in there, you can create things like multi-choice questions, the survey style things, and it's really about being able to put these activities in there. So pairing, as Leon mentioned before, the templates with the content to create an activity. And so you can imagine you can kind of do all sorts of things with it, where if it's an AR experience, you're putting hotspots in there and you're putting resulting content in there. If it's something like a kid's game, like this Mass Mutations one, you know, putting the sort of curriculum-based content in there to report on and to drive, and then you're sequencing it and adding in there. But once you've kind of gone through that base content, you then want to be able to provide feedback to the user. So we've got these additional stages where, for example, we know within, say, a kids app, targeting that sort of learning approach, using that sort of growth mindset is effective for those sorts of apps. So we're able to then guide the app creator through implementing that approach. So rather than if they're getting 100% on all of their tests, we don't want them to kind of keep smashing that one level because it's too easy for them. So we want to put elements in there, rewards and feedback, and have it all cohesively encourage the child or the learner to keep going to more advanced sort of activities that are in there and things. So we guide you through this process of feedback, and it's the same for a kids app or for a sports app or for a research app. It's really about trying to find that stickiness and that engagement and being able to drive the outcomes or the objectives that you're trying to do with the app itself. Once you've kind of done your initial setup of the app, you get a small code, and then again, like I mentioned, you can preview, go into the app community and have a preview it. You can release it to other people to test, get their feedback on it, go back, update it, and then release it. And then we've got we've got a sort of a whole bunch of different sort of publishing options. You don't need to have your own app in the App Store in order to publish it. That's always been a bit of a barrier for people creating their own apps, whether it's research apps or kids apps. We have a Cogniz Central community where you can release it to that community and have others be able to use it and test it, download it. But you also have the option of being able to then publish it independently in the app stores as well in this sort of more enterprise model. What we're keen to do as well, as Leon sort of has touched on, is very much encourage this idea of collaborative learning, whether it's kids being able to work together to create these innovative solutions, or whether it's researchers like yourself pairing them with corporate sort of partners who are able to, again, bring together these different areas of expertise to be able to create more innovative solutions and really drive the boundaries of what we can achieve with these sorts of behaviour change apps and games and solutions within this space.
Okay, so going back to our initial problem that we were trying to solve, if we look in the app stores, these are some examples of mental health and education apps that have been very successful. The small 0.1% that achieve great success. The great thing is when we look at these, all of these we can build in Cogniz, and with version 2 with no program. So we feel like we're going on the right path there. But what really interests us with this is the future of what we can do around the data that we collect. So Cogniz, in its default form, operates as a single social network. So not only when you create your app do you have a social network within your app, but each individual using your app has a Cogniz ID, and they take that Cogniz ID with them from app to app to app. And this means that individual apps and app owners can build up data sets around a user using their product, but we can also tie together these data sets across different apps. And this opens up tremendous opportunities to start to apply machine learning and deep learning to recognize where cognitive issues might exist, where we may be able to warn about potential health risks or different outcomes. Of course, as soon as you start talking about this, you suddenly get into a privacy minefield. And so a big part of our design and our thinking is how can we exploit the possibilities of machine learning around these large data sets and still ensure that people have complete control over their own data. And we'll come back to that in a minute, how we're approaching that. But the outcome is that we can achieve from this is sort of too powerful to pass up. I'll just let Anna talk through.
Yeah, so a quick example, I guess, of how machine learning and this cross-app sort of 360-degree view of the learner and that sort of relationship model can be beneficial across it. Say we've got a small child who's playing a set of apps, a literacy app, a numeracy app, a sports app. We're getting sort of all of that data into the system. and be able to sort of look at the relationships between it all through the machine learning algorithms that are there. We then say the child's teacher has access to that app through the data through the insights model, as well as the teacher. So they're both seeing the same data and able to be on the same page, sorry, parent. And so the system then can be flagged, you know, oh, based on this data set, there's red flags here that this child is showing signs of dyslexia, or showing signs of, you know, different elements that it can pick up, because it's not just a single app that it's looking at the trends across apps as well. So they might consistently be, you know, switching around different letters or things like that. The parent then, can share that data with the child's pediatrician, who can then look at that same central data set. So they have a code, they choose to share it. It's all that control of the guardian or the owner of that data. The paediatrician can then look at that data and go, oh yes, there is something here that we should test this child for dyslexia. We can catch it as early as possible. Let's kind of have a look at that. Then with Cognos, what the paediatrician can do then is design their own app that can be used as an intervention for that side of things. So she again has that expertise or that area, so through the low cost or no code platform, be able to go in and be able to provide that personalized approach there to be able to get in as early as possible and try and offset any impact of that disease.
So this is where we get into the privacy minefield. And so from our point of view, and I'm just going to check which slides we've got here, okay. The trick is, how do we ensure data privacy and still allow for these really smart things to be done? And basically we've developed a model where the individual always owns their data in regards to the different apps that they use, and then they have to explicitly give permission at an app level for other people to use that data. So in the case of where you're just rolling an app out to some students, that might be implicit in the terms and conditions that they're giving their teacher access to data from that one app. But if that student is then using some other apps and they want to give their teacher or want to give a third party access to that data as well, each app has a code inside it that's unique to that individual for that app, and they have to give the person that code in order for them to be able to access that data. So it really ensures that you know exactly who is looking at your data. And the next level of that is obviously to have machine learning apps in there where you can opt in to give access to data from several different apps and see what the machine learning algorithm can produce out of that. So for us, this is something that we've thought about very deeply. It's also something that we want to have an ongoing conversation about with potential users at all levels of our platform. It's the potential good that can be delivered is too great to shy away from this purely for data privacy reasons, but obviously, given particularly the events of the last 2 years, this is something that we're really sensitive about. So to the point where now we're organising, over the next year to do sort of white hat hacking, where we get people external to the organisation, try and think up scenarios of how they could use misuse data, and then get hackers to try and work out whether it's possible to actually do that. Because, it's we never know what we don't know. And so we do recognise there's always some risk of some smart person working out ways to abuse this. But as I said, for us, the opportunities are too great not to try and solve this problem. So for us, it's probably the biggest problem that we're trying to solve, and we're really interested in input from anyone else who has a stake in this or is interested in this. And for us, we think it's going to be this process of moving consumers from fear to empowerment. So ensuring that we address concerns very openly. We have a way of doing our privacy policies that's plain English, very short. People know what their rights are and how their data is being used. There's no 28 pages of Apple terms and conditions that you have to go through. We get people away from this idea of giving consent to things they don't fully understand, and instead make sure people understand how the data is being used and they're making an informed consent if and when they want that data to be used. So please go to our website, sign up for the trial for version 2 that's coming out shortly. I'm sure you'll get our details anyway. And I'll hand back to Lynn.
Great. Okay, thanks, Leon and Anna. That was really interesting. The cognoscentral concept sounds